Imagine, your wife secretly agrees to carry a child for her sister without asking you. One day she says, "I'm pregnant, and it's not yours." What would you do? In this story from Chicago, 42-year-old Michael is dealing with infidelity, divorce, and fighting for his two children when his world is shattered by one shocking piece of news. Michael, a 42-year-old engineer from Chicago, was sprawled on the couch after a long day, flipping through channels, when his wife Sophie dropped the bombshell that would unravel his life. It was a chilly March evening in 2025, the kind where the wind howled outside their modest Lincoln Park home. But inside, the tension was about to hit a whole new level. Sophie sat across from him, her eyes glued to her phone, scrolling with that casual air she always had, like nothing could faze her. Then, out of nowhere, she said it. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air, sharp and heavy. Michael froze, the remote slipping slightly in his hand. He turned to her, expecting a smile, maybe even a laugh, something to signal this was one of their rare moments of joy after years of ups and downs with their two kids. But her face was blank, almost bored. "Wait, what?" he managed, his voice cracking as his mind raced to catch up. "Pregnant?" They hadn't even talked about a third kid. Hell, they barely had time to keep up with the two they already had, Ella, 10, and Noah, 7. Sophie finally looked up, setting her phone down with a small sigh, like she was annoyed she had to explain herself. "It's for Alison," she said, as if that cleared everything up. Michael blinked, his brain stumbling over the name. Alison, her identical twin sister. The one who lived 10 minutes away in Logan Square with her husband Derek, always popping by with some new drama or scheme. "What do you mean, for Alison?" he asked, sitting up straighter, a knot forming in his gut. She shrugged like it was no big deal. "Alison and Derek can't have kids. They've been trying forever, you know that. So I'm going to be their surrogate. It's perfect. I mean, she's my twin. It's basically her DNA anyway." She said it with this faint smile, like she'd just solved world hunger and expected a round of applause. Michael stared at her, waiting for the punchline, because this had to be a joke, right? His wife was pregnant with someone else's kid, and she was acting like it was as simple as picking up groceries. "Hold on," he said, leaning forward, his voice low but trembling. "You're telling me you're pregnant? Right now? With her baby?" Sophie nodded, still smiling that infuriating little smile. "Yeah, we've been planning it for a while. Went to the clinic a few weeks back. It's all set." Michael's stomach dropped. "Weeks? Weeks? And you didn't think to tell me?" he asked, his tone sharpening as the reality sank in. She'd been scheming this behind his back. Her, Alison, Derek, the whole damn trio. And he was just supposed to nod and go along with it? Sophie rolled her eyes, crossing her arms. "I'm telling you now, aren't I? Look, Michael, this isn't about you. It's my body, my choice. I don't need your permission." The words hit him like a slap. Permission? This wasn't about permission. This was about trust, about partnership, about the life they'd built together. He stood up, running a hand through his graying hair, trying to process the betrayal. "Sophie, we're married," he said, his voice rising despite his effort to stay calm. "This isn't just your decision. This affects us, me, the kids, everything. How could you not talk to me first?" She set her jaw, her expression hardening. "I knew you'd freak out like this. That's why I waited. But it's happening, Michael, whether you like it or not." He let out a sharp, bitter laugh, shaking his head. "Oh, great. So you made up your mind, and I'm just supposed to deal with it? That's not how marriage works." She stood up too, stepping closer, her eyes narrowing. "This is for my sister. It's a beautiful thing I'm doing. I thought you'd get that." "Beautiful?" he shot back, incredulous. "You, Alison, and Derek cooked this up for weeks, maybe months, without a single word to me. And now I'm supposed to clap for you? My wife's pregnant with another man's kid, and I'm the last to know. You don't see a problem with that?" She crossed her arms tighter, her voice dropping to a cold edge. "If you can't handle it, maybe we need to rethink things." There was the ultimatum, not even subtle. Get on board or get out. Michael stared at her, the woman he'd spent 15 years with, the mother of his kids, and for the first time, he didn't recognize her. "If you go through with this," he said, his voice steady despite the storm inside, "we're done." Sophie's face twisted with frustration. "You're being ridiculous," she snapped. "This isn't about us. It's about helping family." He shook his head, turning away. "No, Sophie. It's about you choosing them over me. That night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the weight of her words crushed him. She wasn't joking. She wasn't backing down. And worse, she didn't care what it did to him. Down the hall, he could hear Ella and Noah giggling over some game, oblivious to the fact that their world was about to split apart. Michael clenched his fists, his mind racing. How had it come to this? And what the hell was he supposed to do now? The weeks after Sophie's bombshell felt like a slow-motion car crash for Michael. Their Lincoln Park home, once a sanctuary for him, Ella, and Noah, turned into a battleground of silence and sharp words. It was mid-April 2025 now, and the Chicago spring did nothing to thaw the ice between them. Sophie didn't back down, not an inch. She marched forward with her plan like it was some noble quest, leaving Michael to choke on the wreckage of their marriage. He'd given her an ultimatum that night. If you do this, I'm out. She'd called his bluff, and now he was staring down the barrel of a choice he never wanted to make. At first, he tried reasoning with her. One evening, as the kids played upstairs, he cornered her in the kitchen. She was chopping carrots for dinner, the knife hitting the board with a rhythm that matched the tension in the air. "Sophie," he started, keeping his voice low. "Can we at least talk about this? You're about to turn our lives upside down. Don't I get a say?" She didn't even glance up. "What's there to talk about? It's done. I am helping Alison. You're making it a bigger deal than it needs to be." He gripped the counter, knuckles whitening. "A bigger deal? You're pregnant with Derek's kid. How am I supposed to just shrug that off?" She slammed the knife down, finally meeting his eyes. "It's not Derek's kid like that. It's a medical thing, Michael. A donation. This is for my sister, my twin. You're acting like I betrayed you." He laughed, a harsh, hollow sound. "You did. You went behind my back, planned this with them, and now I'm supposed to play happy husband while you grow their baby? That's not how this works." She glared, crossing her arms. "I don't need your approval. I told you it's my body." He shook his head, stepping back. "And this is my life. You don't get to decide that for me." That was the last real conversation they had about it. Sophie doubled down, scheduling doctor's appointments, and chattering with Alison over the phone like it was a fun little project. Michael watched it unfold, a knot of anger and disbelief tightening in his chest. Then came the confirmation. 3 months later, in July, she was officially pregnant. She told him over breakfast, casual as ever, while Noah spilled cereal on the table. "It worked," she said, sipping her coffee. "I'm due in February." Michael just nodded, his jaw tight, and said okay. Then he stood, grabbed his keys, and walked out. 2 days later, he filed for divorce. The paperwork had been sitting in his desk drawer since that first night, drafted in a haze of fury and hurt. He'd hoped, foolishly, maybe, that she'd see reason, that she'd choose him over this insane plan. But she didn't, and he wasn't bluffing. When he told her he'd filed, she stared at him, wide-eyed, like he'd slapped her. "You're serious?" she asked, her voice shaking. "You're actually leaving me over this?" He met her gaze, unflinching. "I told you what would happen. You made your choice." She laughed, a bitter edge to it. "You're throwing away 15 years because I'm helping my sister? You're unbelievable." "No," he shot back. "You threw it away when you decided I didn't matter." The fight escalated from there, voices rising until Ella peeked around the corner, her eyes wide. "Daddy, why are you yelling?" she asked, and Michael's heart sank. He softened his tone, ushering her back upstairs. "It's okay, sweetie. Just grown-up stuff." But it wasn't okay. Nothing was. Sophie's family didn't help. Alison called the next day, her voice dripping with venom. "You're abandoning her? She's pregnant, Michael. How heartless are you?" He gripped the phone, biting back a curse. "She's pregnant with your kid, Alison. You and Derek figure out. I didn't sign up for this." She gasped, offended. "This is a gift she's giving us. You should be proud of her." He snorted. "Proud? You three cooked this up behind my back. Don't lecture me about family." Derek tried next, playing the peacemaker. "Man, I get it's tough, but we're all in this together. Don't you see how beautiful this is?" Michael cut him off. "Beautiful for you, maybe. Not for me. Step up and deal with it yourselves." Sophie didn't take it quietly either. She alternated between rage and tears, 1 minute screaming that he was selfish, the next begging him to reconsider. "You're tearing our family apart," she sobbed one night, clutching a pillow on the couch. "The kids need us together." He crossed his arms, unmoved. "You tore it apart when you chose Alison over us. Don't put this on me." She glared through her tears. You'll regret this, Michael. I'm doing something good, and you're punishing me for it. By August, the separation was official. Illinois law meant they had to wait 12 months before the divorce could finalize, an agonizing limbo that kept them under the same roof for the kids' sake. Sophie stayed, claiming she couldn't find a place fast enough, especially pregnant. But Michael knew better. It was convenience, pure and simple. She expected him to keep playing husband, to nod and smile, while her belly grew with a child that wasn't his. He checked out instead, retreating to his office or the garage, anywhere to avoid her. The kids felt it too. Ella stopped asking why Mommy was mad, and Noah clung to him more, sensing the shift. One night, as thunder rumbled over Chicago, Michael sat alone in the dark, replaying it all. Sophie had crossed a line he couldn't forgive, and her family's guilt trips only fueled his resolve. He wasn't the villain here, no matter how much they painted him as one. But as the rain beat against the windows, he wondered, could he really walk away from 15 years? The answer came fast and cold. Yes, because staying meant losing himself, and he wasn't willing to do that. Not for Sophie, not for anyone. By September 2025, the air in Michael's Chicago home was thick with unspoken resentment. The divorce was filed, but Sophie still hadn't moved out. She clung to the excuse of convenience for the kids, claiming it was too hard to find a place in Lincoln Park while pregnant. Michael saw through it. She wanted the stability he provided, the roof over her head, the routine he kept running for Ella and Noah. But he wasn't playing along anymore. The man who'd once fixed every leak and cooked Sunday dinners had checked out, replaced by a steel wall of indifference. Sophie's belly grew, a constant reminder of her choice, and she started leaning on him harder, testing his limits. It began with small asks. One humid evening, as cicadas buzzed outside, she waddled into the living room where Michael was watching baseball. "Can you grab me some water?" she asked, rubbing her stomach dramatically. He didn't look up. "Get it yourself," she huffed, shifting her weight. "Michael, come on. It's just water. I'm exhausted." He muted the TV, turning to her with a flat stare. "Not my kid, not my problem." Her jaw tightened, but she shuffled off, muttering under her breath. It wasn't the last time. The requests escalated. "Can you carry the groceries in?" she'd ask, or "I need help setting up the bassinet." Every time, Michael's answer was the same. "Not my kid, not my problem." She'd glare, sometimes storm off, sometimes try guilt. "I'm doing this alone," she snapped one afternoon, her voice sharp as she struggled with a box of baby clothes. "You could at least pretend to care." He set down his coffee, meeting her eyes. "You're not alone. You got Alison and Derek. Call them." She didn't. Alison was too stressed after some vague health scare, and Derek was swamped at work. Michael wasn't surprised. Those two had been ghosts since the pregnancy started, leaving Sophie to fend for herself. One night, it hit a boiling point. Michael was in the garage, tinkering with an old bike to clear his head, when Sophie barged in, her face flushed. "I can't do this anymore," she said, voice trembling. "I'm 5 months pregnant. I'm tired, and you're just sitting here like nothing's wrong." He wiped his hands on a rag, not breaking eye contact. "What do you want from me, Sophie? I told you where I stood. You went ahead anyway." She stepped closer, tears welling up. "I need help, Michael. This isn't what I thought it'd be. You're still my husband." He tossed the rag aside, his voice cold. "No, I'm not. You stopped being my wife when you let Derek put that baby in you. Don't come crying to me now, because it's hard." Her face crumpled, and she let out a shaky sob. "You're cruel," she whispered, turning away. Michael watched her go, feeling a flicker of something, guilt, maybe, but it vanished fast. She'd made her bed. He wasn't lying in it. The next day, she tried a new tactic, playing nice. She shuffled into the kitchen while he cooked for the kids, leaning against the counter. "Remember when we used to do this together?" she said softly, watching him stir a pot of pasta. "I miss that." He didn't bite. "That was a different life," he replied, keeping his focus on the stove. She pressed on. "I still love you, Michael. We could fix this." He turned off the burner, facing her. "You don't love me. You love what I gave you, stability, a home. You torched that for Alison. There's no fixing this." She flinched, but the tears didn't come this time. Instead, she straightened up, her voice hardening. "Fine, be that way. But when this baby's born, you'll see how wrong you are." Michael shrugged. "We'll see." The standoff stretched on, weeks of her pushing and him shutting her down. Ella and Noah started noticing. Ella asked why Mommy was sad all the time, and Noah clung to Michael like he sensed the rift widening. He kept it simple with them. Mommy's got a lot going on, but we're okay. It was a half-truth, but it was all he had. Then came the twist he hadn't expected. One rainy October night, Sophie's phone buzzed incessantly on the counter while she showered. Michael glanced at it. Alison's name flashed over and over. Curiosity got the better of him. He picked it up, seeing a string of texts. "Sophie, where are you? Derek's freaking out. We need you to sign the papers ASAP. This surrogacy deal's falling apart if you don't." Michael's blood ran cold. Papers? Falling apart? He scrolled up, piecing it together. Alison and Derek hadn't secured the legal side yet. Sophie was stalling, maybe leveraging it for something. He set the phone down, his mind racing. Was she playing them too? Or just too stubborn to admit she'd screwed up? When she emerged, towel around her hair, he didn't say a word about it. But the seed was planted. Sophie wasn't just reckless. She was in deeper than she let on. The next morning, he asked casually, "How's Alison holding up with all this?" Sophie stiffened, avoiding his gaze. "She's fine." "What?" He shrugged. "Just wondering. Thought Derek'd be more involved by now." She muttered something about him being busy and left the room. Michael leaned back, a grim smile tugging at his lips. Her perfect plan was cracking, and she knew it. As November loomed, the house felt like a pressure cooker. Sophie's desperation grew. More sighs, more hints, more jabs about his coldness. Michael held firm, but the kids' questions got harder. "Why doesn't Mommy smile anymore?" Noah asked one night, curled up on the couch. Michael hugged him tight. "She's figuring things out, bud. We all are." Inside, though, he knew. Sophie's mess was hers alone, and he wasn't lifting a finger to clean it up. Not now, not ever. Winter hit Chicago hard in December 2025, blanketing Lincoln Park in snow and ice. But the real storm was brewing inside Michael's home. Sophie's surrogacy had reached its peak. 7 months pregnant, she was a walking contradiction of defiance and desperation. The divorce was still crawling through Illinois' mandatory 12-month separation, trapping them under the same roof. Michael had held his ground, refusing to play husband to a wife who'd betrayed him, but Sophie wasn't letting go without a fight. What started as subtle jabs and guilt trips escalated into a full-on war, and the battlefield was their kids, Ella and Noah. It kicked off one frigid night when Sophie came home from a doctor's appointment, her coat barely hiding her swollen belly. Michael was helping Noah with homework at the kitchen table while Ella doodled nearby. Sophie dropped her bag with a loud thud, sighing dramatically. "God, I'm exhausted," she said, loud enough to demand attention. Michael didn't look up. "Rough day," she added, rubbing her stomach. "This baby's kicking like crazy." He kept his eyes on Noah's math sheet. "Called Derek. He'd probably love to hear about it." Her face darkened, but she didn't bite back. Not yet. The next move came a week later. Sophie cornered him in the hallway, her voice low so the kids wouldn't hear. "I can't keep doing this alone," she said, her eyes pleading. "I need you, Michael. The kids need us together." He stepped back, crossing his arms. "You're not alone. You got Alison and Derek. This was their idea." She shook her head, tears brimming. "They're not here. Alison's a mess. Derek's checked out. I'm drowning, and you're just watching." He met her gaze, unflinching. "You jumped in that water, Sophie. I told you I wouldn't swim after you." She tried tears next, collapsing onto the couch one evening as Ella and Noah watched TV. "I made a mistake," she sobbed, loud enough for them to turn. "I thought I was helping Alison, but I ruined everything. I still love you, Michael. We can fix this." Ella's eyes widened, and Noah scooted closer to Michael, confused. He switched off the TV, keeping his voice steady. "Go upstairs, guys. I'll be up soon." They obeyed, casting worried glances. Alone with Sophie, he leaned forward. "Don't do that in front of them. You don't love me. You love what I gave you. A stable life. You traded that for this mess." Her tears stopped, replaced by fury. "You're heartless," she spat, standing up. "I'm begging you, and you just sit there? One day, you'll regret this." He shrugged. "Maybe, but I'm not caving." That set her off. She stormed out, slamming the door, and for a moment, he thought she'd left for good. She didn't. 2 days later, she was back, baby strapped to her chest. She'd given birth early, a girl, handed off to Alison and Derek. Michael stayed out of it, didn't ask, didn't visit. She'd called from the hospital, sobbing, "Please come. I am scared. He'd said, you chose this. Called Derek, and hung up. When she returned, the real chaos began. Baby stuff invaded the house. Bottles on the counter, diapers in the hall. Like she was daring him to react. He didn't. She'd knock on his door at night, the newborn crying in the background. Michael, please, just tell me once, she'd beg, exhausted. Not my kid. Not my problem, he'd reply, shutting the door. She'd stomp off, muttering about his cruelty, but he held firm. Then came the Hail Mary. One snowy afternoon, she stood in the living room, the baby in her arms, dark circles under her eyes. Hold her, she said, voice raw. Just for an hour. I haven't slept in days. He looked at the tiny face, innocent and unaware, and for a second, he wavered. But then he remembered. Sophie's lies, her choice, the months of disrespect. No, he said. Call Derek. He's the father. Her lip trembled, tears spilling. You hate me that much. He shook his head. I don't hate you. I'm just done cleaning up your mess. She left that night, bag packed, baby bundled, moving to Alison's. Michael exhaled, thinking it was over. It wasn't. The call started. Alison first, venomous. She's falling apart because of you. Derek next, pleading. We're family, man. Help us out. Sophie's mom piled on. You're abandoning your wife. He blocked them all, but Sophie used the kids as her final weapon. During a visitation drop-off, she lingered. Let me move back in, she said. The kids need me here. He shut down. They've got me. You made your choice. The divorce hearing in February 2026 was the breaking point. Sophie's lawyer painted her as a saint, sacrificing for family, abandoned by a cold husband. Michael's lawyer countered with facts, texts proving he'd objected, records of her instability, her leaning on him for a child that wasn't his. The judge saw through it. Full custody to Mr. Reynolds, she ruled. Ms. Reynolds gets visitation. Sophie's face fell, but Michael felt no triumph, just relief. Outside the courtroom, she grabbed his arm. I don't want to like this, she whispered. I'll be there for them, he said, pulling away. But not for you. The kids were his now, and Sophie's chaos was hers to bear. The climax had passed, but the scars lingered. Spring arrived in Chicago by March 2026, melting the snow that had buried Lincoln Park under a cold, gray shroud. For Michael, the thaw mirrored his life. After months of legal battles, emotional warfare, and Sophie's relentless push to drag him back into her mess, the divorce was final. The courtroom ruling still echoed in his ears. Full custody of Ella and Noah, with Sophie relegated to scheduled visitation. The house, once a pressure cooker of tension, felt lighter, quieter. It wasn't perfect. Single-parenting 2 kids while juggling his engineering job was no picnic. But for the first time in over a year, Michael could breathe. The chaos was gone, and he was determined to keep it that way. Sophie had moved in with Alison and Derek permanently after the hearing. The newborn, a girl named Lily, now officially theirs. Michael didn't ask about her, didn't care. He'd stayed true to his line, not my kid, not my problem. When Sophie left that last night in December, bag slung over her shoulder and baby in tow, he'd watch her go without a word. She'd paused at the door, waiting for him to stop her. He didn't. The calls from her family stopped too. Alison's venom, Derek's fake pleas, her mom's guilt trips, all faded into silence. Maybe they'd finally realized he wasn't budging, or maybe they'd given up. Either way, it was a relief. The kids adjusted, though it wasn't seamless. Ella, sharp and perceptive at 10, asked hard questions. One sunny afternoon, as they walked home from school, she kicked a pebble and looked up at him. Dad, why doesn't Lily live with us? Mom had her, right? Michael took a slow breath, choosing his words. Mom helped Aunt Alison and Uncle Derek have a baby. Lily's their daughter, not ours. It's different from you and Noah. She nodded, processing, but her frown lingered. Noah, at 7, was simpler, less curious, more clingy. Is Mom coming back? He asked one night, hugging his stuffed dinosaur. Michael ruffled his hair. She'll visit, Bud. But we're a team now, you, me, and Ella. Noah smiled, comforted, and that was enough for him. Sophie's visits were sporadic at first. She'd show up every other weekend, per the court order, but her energy was off, worn down, distracted. During one drop-off, she lingered by the front door, watching Ella and Noah run inside. They're growing so fast, she said, her voice soft. Michael nodded, keeping it neutral. Yeah, they are. She hesitated, then tried again. I missed this. Us. He crossed his arms, shutting it down. That's over, Sophie. Focus on them, not me. She bit her lip, nodded, and left. It became a pattern, brief moments of nostalgia, quickly snuffed out. He wasn't cruel, just done. Life settled into a rhythm. Michael threw himself into the kids. School runs, soccer games, quiet nights with board games or movies. Ella started drawing more, her sketches filling the fridge, while Noah's laughter bounced through the house again. Work was steady, his engineering projects a welcome distraction. Friends noticed the change. You look lighter, his buddy Tom said over beers one night. Michael smirked. Feel it too. First time in years, I'm not carrying someone else's weight. Tom raised his glass. To freedom, man. Michael clinked it, grinning. Damn right. But Sophie's shadow lingered. One evening in April, she called out of the blue, her voice shaky. Michael, I need help. Lily's daycare fell through, and I can't afford a new one yet. I'm trying to work, but he cut her off, calm but firm. Not my problem, Sophie. Talk to Derek or Alison. She laughed bitterly. You're still on that? They're useless right now. I thought you'd at least care about the kids. He leaned against the counter, unfazed. Ido, Ella, and Noah are fine. You figure out your mess. She hung up, and he didn't hear from her for weeks. When she resurfaced at the next visitation, she looked thinner, tired. I'm sorry, she muttered, dropping off the kids. For everything. He nodded. Hope it works out. That was it. No anger, no gloating, just closure. The kids brought up Lily sometimes. She's kind of like our cousin, right? Ella asked once, coloring at the table. Yeah, Michael said, kinda. Noah piped up. She's cute. Mom showed us pictures. Michael smiled faintly. Good. I'm glad she's doing okay. He meant it. The baby wasn't at fault, and he didn't wish Sophie ill. He just wasn't her lifeline anymore. Her family stayed quiet too. No more letters or calls. Maybe they'd moved on, or maybe they'd accepted the new reality. Either way, Michael was free of their noise. By May, the house felt like home again. He'd repainted the living room, a bright blue Ella picked, erasing the last traces of Sophie's presence. One night, as the kids slept, he sat on the porch, the city humming in the distance. The weight of the past year, her betrayal, the fights, the courtroom, lifted. He wasn't naive. Single parenting had its rough days. Ella's mood swung. Noah missed his mom sometimes, and the bills piled up. But it was his life now, not hers to dictate. He thought back to her last plea, her tears, and felt nothing. No regret, no guilt. Just peace. Looking at the stars, he muttered to himself, I made it. The kids were safe, the chaos was gone, and for the first time in forever, Michael was in control. Spring had come, and with it, a new beginning, one he'd fight to keep.